Dan,
Yes.
32 years ago,
Present.
you started Primetime Christian Broadcasting in Roswell, New Mexico. That was 1982 when you two decided that this was going to happen. Of course, at that time, you had Roswell, Brake Alignment, and RV Center. But it was just 8 years before that, Dad, that you had left corporate life and you were high on the ladder at GTE Linkert. Moved to Roswell, New Mexico, bought a little business, turned it into a quite successful RV center, and then you started Primetime. What was that like for you at 49
Which
to
part?
make your second, to make the second major change in your life within 8 years at the age of 49?
Are you talking about leaving corporate life,
Yes.
No, not leaving corporate life, Dad.
starting GLC?
Starting GLC and then giving up Roswell RV Center. What was it like? Was it much of a challenge to you? Or was it?
You know, I'll give you a little secret. Our next door neighbor, he bought a new motorhome the other day. It was a big Winnebago, and I was over visiting with him. I said, you know, I remember when I sold Winnebagos and they sold for less than $17,000.
We wouldn't even carry them.
They were so
Because
cheap.
there were, oh,
Now they're very luxurious, but
Yeah.
back then they were
That was
garbage.
$274,000.
they are now.
So I still have a heart for motorhomes. He said, do you want to go look in it? I said, no, because if I do, I'll start remembering why, and maybe I'd want to go back.
Why you sold them?
Yeah. But
I think that was the hardest part of
What's that?
the transition was he loved that RV center so much, and it had been such a ministry. It was miracle after miracle
Talking
with
to people
the
about
RVs.
the Lord right there in the.
Well, what was so interesting, the one that always will stand out, because it happened over and over. Tommy would tell me, hey, we're a little bit low on funds. I said, well, have we paid our tithe lately? And she'd say, no, we didn't have the money. Pay it. Correct me if I'm wrong. As soon as she'd write that check out, there'd be somebody standing there at the counter wanting to buy a motorhome.
Mm-hmm.
That's no lie. Tithing pays dividends for you and to God. He is not slack in his word.
You know, to build his kingdom, his people have to participate.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And if they're holding on to everything they've got for themselves, his kingdom ain't getting anywhere.
But,
Well, it wasn't that we were holding on to it. It was
No.
just so hectic.
you forgot
You know,
to do it.
sometimes you just didn't get around to.
Sure.
Have our lives always been this hectic?
I think so, and it just keeps snowballing.
But in those days, I had been tricked into becoming the president of the Full Gospel Businessman,
Literally.
literally. And that was where God was teaching me to minister to people and be their friends and so on. And so, to answer your question, how did it start?
No, what was it like for you?
Well, we had just taken on a new line of motorhomes. What was that one that came out of South Carolina, Alabama?
The Allegro?
The Allegro. And I was just showing one of the new ones to a man who was in ministry, him and his wife. And as I finished up, there was a woman standing outside the door, kind of with a determined look, and I'm not too sure she didn't have a tear in her eyes. And she said to me, you want to say what you said to me?
She's talking about you.
You, Mom.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I just had just seen something on TV that really upset me.
On a Christian station.
And I went to him and I said, you have got to start a television station. We went with the idea when we moved from California. We moved with the idea to start a radio station in Roswell.
Yeah.
But
Because I had the FCC
yeah,
license to
he
do
knew
it.
how to do that stuff, but that never panned out. And then when this Christian station took off their teachers, they had teachers, 30 minutes back to back all day.
And that was in
just-
August of 1982 that she did that. I remember
They
the
they
month.
took them off and started family entertainment, and they played
And
Groucho Marx and I Spy and all this kind of stuff.
And selling advertising.
And I went to him and I said, you know, Christians do not need to be entertained; they need to be discipled, and you got to do something. So,
And that's why the name Primetime came about. That Christian programming deserved to be in primetime as much as an NFL football game. I have never changed my mind on that. And within, I think it was on probably around the 5th or 9th day of September, we filed for our 501c3, the nonprofit organization, which you've heard so much about with the Tea Party and they don't do this and that. And that was the first miracle that we ever saw in that time frame, because within 90 days, we had been notified by the IRS that they were issuing us a 501c3. I might as well tell the rest of this part of the story. And they said, we'll be out to talk. They told this to Hank Wunsch, which was our trustee and bookkeeper in those days. And we'll be out to talk to Mr. Cooper and you. That's what they said. So they showed up in January, not even 30 days later. And this will get you, Rick. First question they asked Hank was, what church am I ordained in? He says, he's just an engineer. He's what? He's just a television engineer that wants to do this. They asked one more question. I don't know what it was. The IRS man says, closed the book and says, let's go to lunch. That was in 1983, January. And what is it now? 30 some odd years later? We still haven't heard anything more from the IRS. You have a question on
That's
your
because
990?
you're still just an engineer.
yeah.
I'm beginning to wonder if I'm still just an engineer
If you're even an engineer.
with all those changes that are coming.
Yeah,
Of
really.
course.
There's been a lot of changes.
Oh,
What was support like when you started?
what?
we saved the blackboard that we kept totals on for a long time.
It's still upstairs.
No, I think that was from a later one because that is too big.
Well, we did our first
It was
roundup.
less than $1,000, I think.
I know how much it was. We did our first asking for money in the end of 1993, in November 1993. And it was 700.
So you operated for 10 years without asking for money?
10 months.
So 83.
You said 93.
83, 1983. Okay.
Okay.
83.
With gray hair, you're allowed that mistake. And the total was $7,394. That was the total pledges for that year. And we needed a computer. In those days, they were very expensive. I'm sure it was 7,000, or was it 700? Maybe it was 700.
It was really small. It was
It
really
was small. It was 700 because we bought the first one from Kmart. It was $734.
All our equipment came from Radio Shack and
Radio
Kmart.
Shack was like Dad's favorite place.
It was, yes. All the monitors and
You know, everything.
So
I look at
TLC
stuff-
hasn't been like a big cash cow for you then, huh?
Hardly.
You know, as far as support, then that was 1983. And 84, the FCC made it very clear that they weren't going to allow anybody to build low power stations. That was a going thing, and that was the analog days. And it had to go to a full power station. And I remember looking up and finding out there were 2 allocations for Roswell for full power stations that hadn't been built. There's channel 21 and channel 27. And so, with the help of the people, well, I think it only cost us about $1,000 with the FCC to file, but I did the engineering. And we filed for channel 21. And you're saying, well, you're on channel 27. Well, this is my first introduction to how Washington, D.C. works. It's so damn crooked, it makes you wonder. Really, it gets you furious.
Okay, what you see is what you get,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. And so when I filed for Channel 21, I thought it'd just go right through. But then I was notified by a Christian man attorney that we had met that handled FCC FAT that we had been filed upon on top of. And the FCC even had a name for them, greenmailers. You've heard of blackmail?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the FCC called them greenmailers because they got paid off in dollars to get them out of the situation.
So that if you file and someone else files, you'll pay them to leave you alone and to let you have it.
The withdrawal. And when you don't have any money, you can get them to withdraw, you know. And that was our situation. And then I thought, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm telling everybody. I'm a big mouth. And I told everybody we were filed for Channel 21, you know. And we were just on the Roswell cable system in those days. But yet, a guy by the name of Boozer, that was his last name, Boozer. He was from Baltimore. He heard about it and filed on that 21. So there was changes had to be made to correct what you filed. The first time I ever filed, they had a lot of changes. So I filed for Channel 27. And I never told anybody. And when the paperwork came out of the FCC on these changes, I got so stinking mad because the FCC thing was garbled. You couldn't tell what channel it was. And I thought, what's the matter with those people? It was Channel 27. But the reason was, that was God didn't want anybody to know what we were doing. And across the nation, the channel got messed up. Isn't that something?
It is.
That's what God's done, GLC.
Well, I know that because I worked for you at the RV Center, and then I, of course, came to prime time. I know that things would get tight, bills were due, but we had a reputation for paying our bills on time.
Right.
Because God always made sure the money was there when we needed it.
That's right.
That's always been his MO.
Amen.
You know, Dad, I know that you didn't have a whole lot of use for Israel back in '93.
You know why?
Mm-hmm.
I'll
But they
tell
don't.
these people. In 1993, at that time, we had opened up here, and one of the greatest men I ever knew, his name was Hayseed Stevens. Yeah, the guy that played football. His fame in football was that
He followed Joe Namath, or Joe Namath replaced him.
yeah, Joe Namath replaced him. That was his greatest fame. But he was quite an evangelist, and he came on and off with us, and even before we moved here, over in Roswell, he came over and was on the air with us after we got KRP on the air. gotta add one little thing. Something I just found out this last week. Everybody who knew much about CBN knew about Dick Mills. He was probably the greatest prophet that I think I've ever known. And in 1984, before we got our license from the FCC to bill, he came in on Memorial Day. He came in because he was a friend of mine, a great friend of Tom Ingram, who was my vice president in Full Gospel. And Tom was an oil man. And of course, people who have money, well,
It's nice to have prophets around if you have money. That's why I don't have any.
and he came in and I'll never forget, he gave prophecy out of Isaiah about stretching a cord.
Lengthening
Lengthen your cord and
tents.
strengthen your stakes.
And he said to Tommy and I, Al, you're going to go into 6 states. I couldn't even get out of the city limits. Really? And I thought, man, this guy's missed it. But I'm going to give you a little PS to Dick Mills, something I just learned last year. One of our favorite, and I guess the guy that's been on the longest program is
Joe?
Magee. And for starting in 1999, when I first met Joe Magee through our good friend J.D. Crawford's church, he'd come in there and speak. And I thought, me and Tommy thought, man, he'd be good to be on TV. I said to him, introduced myself, Joe, you need to be on prime time. Yeah. That was his total response. And so for 2 or 3 years, he would just ignore that, our invitation. But he told us a story, Tommy and I, about a year ago, that he was a good friend of this prophet Dick Mills from CBN. And they served on the same board of a big ministry down in Florida. And Tommy, would you tell that part of the story? I get it mixed up.
Well, they had been at a board meeting,
Yeah.
and they were going to the airport to go home. And Joe said that you don't talk to Dick on the way to the airport because he sleeps. As soon as he gets in the car, he goes to sleep. And then they dropped him off at his gate, dropped Dick off at his gate, and he got out. At the meeting, he had, I guess there was a big meeting too, as well as the board meeting. He had given prophecies to everyone, just everyone, except Joe. Even gave Joe's wife a word. And Joe was sitting there thinking, well, what about me? I want a word. And he couldn't ask him on the way to the airport, because he was asleep. So Dick gets out of the car and gets his suitcase and heads for the door, and he turns around and says, hey, Joe, I got a word for you. Prime time. Great. What does that mean?
Wow.
And so Joe, was really disappointed. And he got home, was telling his wife. And she said, well,
Let me
Joe,
add one thing. Dick Mills wouldn't have known prime time from
No, he
anybody
didn't.
else because we,
it's been so long.
oh,
That's incredible.
yeah.
His wife said, Joe, Primetime's been asking you to be a programmer for years. He said, oh. And that's why he's here,
That's why he's
because of
Wow.
that prophecy from Dick Mills.
If you enjoyed this clip, please feel free to check out the full version in the link located in the description panel below. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. As always, help yourself to the diverse array of teachings located on this YouTube channel or on our website at glc.us.com.